The more I study history, the more I notice important South Carolina history is missing from education. I have been told that this happened after the Civil War as the North tried to remove any accolades the South could be proud of. Hundreds of miles from the northern battlefield, between the town of Walterboro and Jacksonboro, in the heart of Colleton County, stands an historical marker. This marker was placed in 1962 and tells of the Parker's Ferry Battle. This battle took place 1 mile from the ferry and involved Francis Marion and his men ambushing 540 Hessian, British, and Tories. Prior to this battle, the South had endured great cruelty at the hands of the British. One example of this was the illegal lynching of patriot martyr Isaac Hayne. Eerily, the resting place and former plantation of Hayne is only a short distance away. In addition, the following correspondence talks of the Hayne murder. The first communication from General Greene to Marion dates August 10, 1781, in which he writes that Colonel Hardin had told him of the death of Colonel Hayne, and that the enemy was seizing all of the rice, and asked that Marion go to the aid of Hardin. Greene writes under the date of the 15th to the President of Congress advising him that he has to dispatch Marion with plenty of militia and regular horses to aid Hardin, as the enemy is seizing all the rice along the Combahee River. The next communication is from Marion to Greene, written September 3, 1781, and gives a day-to-day account of his movement and the Battle of Parker's Ferry. He reports that on the 22nd of August, he began his march to Roundow, arriving the next day where he expected to meet Colonel Hardin, but he found Hardin ill and his troops not yet collected. He halted and then proceeded to Horseshoe. On the night of the 26th, he was joined by Colonel Stafford and 150 men and Colonel Hardin with 80. Which means there was about 400. On the 27th, I crossed the great swamp at the head of the Ashepoo and encamped within the swamp, and encamped within 4 miles of the enemy at Middleton south of Godfrey, Savannah. The day before, he reports he had sent Colonel Hugh Horry of Cheraw, where he heard they had 3 schooners loading rice, but unluckily the enemy learned of their approach and went down to the river. The strength of the enemy was 180 Hessians, 150 Tory, and 80 of the Queen's Rangers equipped as dragoons under the command of Major Fraser. The causeway at Godfrey, Savannah was a good one, wrote Marion, and he placed a guard there, his whole army being 2 miles away. The enemy moved on them at midnight, and before Marion could get his troops together, had passed the post without a shot being fired. Marion followed the encampment 3 miles away, and on the 30th Marion moved below them and formed an ambush on the road 1 mile from Parker's Ferry. There he learned that there was a body of 100 Tories under Colonel Cunningham from Dorchester and Stono on the banks of the river at Parker's Ferry. Marion placed his men in position and waited until sunset. By the time the Tories on the river came along the causeway, Marion had planned to let them pass, but they spied one of his men and began firing, which brought the main army down on them. The enemy's cavalry came at full speed and received Marion's fire. A false report that the enemy was flanking Marion's men on the right resulted in confusion, and before Marion could rally his men, the enemy retired from the field, leaving 20 men and 25 horses on the spot. There are 2 other accounts, one reflecting the British viewpoint and the other a loyalist. An American Experience in the British Army. Manuscripts of Colonel Stephen Jarvis, born in 1756, revealing the life of the loyalist who refused to renounce their allegiance to the king and fought to save the western continent to the British Empire, relating the remarkable experiences as a recruit in the lines of the British Army accurate transcripts from the original manuscript, which was lost for many years and has been recently recovered, now in possession of an Honorable Charles Maple Jarvis, descendant of Colonel Jarvis. We proceeded as far as the Combahee River. This was a foraging party to procure rice for the hospital, and after completing the objective, we commenced our march back. We halted at Colonel Haynes' plantation that night, the night after he was brought home, and burned the garden. I saw his grave. In the afternoon of the next day, we left his plantation, and as we got intelligence that General Marion had collected a body of troops to give us annoyance on our route, the order of marching was changed, the infantry and artillery in front, and the cavalry in the rear. We marched in this order until we came to a long swamp, a mile or so from Parker's Ferry, when we heard some few shots in front, and Major Fraser ordered the cavalry to advance, and seeing some of the troops at a long distance off, and supposing them to be the enemy, charged over this long causeway and fell into ambush, laid by the enemy, and we received most galling fire ever troops experienced. We only saw the flash of the pieces of the enemy, they were so completely hidden from our view. We had only to push forward, men and horses falling before and behind. We lost 125 killed and greatly many wounded, and the enemy retired without a loss of a man. All our artillery were killed or wounded before they could bring their guns to bear upon the enemy. We halted at Parker's Ferry that night, dropped our wounded, and the next morning collected our dead and buried them, and then proceeded on our route until we reached Dorchester without any molestation from the enemy. The day after our arrival at Dorchester, Major Fraser went to Charleston, South Carolina, to make a report of our sad disaster. He returned at midnight with the news of the Battle of Eutaw Springs, and we ordered immediately to mount and march. Early writers of South Carolina history lamented that the Battle of Parker's Ferry had not been given its rightful place in history. While this battle is not well known in the history books, it was a very important one. Perhaps future historians will continue to ignore this battle, but no longer is it being ignored by history-conscious people. To me, it's very important that we learn our local history and what is our beautiful home of South Carolina. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, and as always, thanks for watching.